sometimes it's just one of those days where you gotta take it easy and have a little bit of a pick-me-up in the form of a good Pokemon battle and a good movie. And in this video, we are going over not just one good Pokemon battle, but a best of 3 set of them. And in the pinned comment, I have provided a link to a movie that tends to be in my thoughts on days like today. It's one of my all-time favorites, and it is freely available on YouTube. Isn't that just wonderful? So I hope that you check it out and that it helps you as it has me. Anyway, this series is interesting because, first of all, you have my guarantee of quality. I have watched this series. I know that it's a set of good battles. Sometimes you see a series between two great players and you get excited, and then dumb stuff happens because Pokemon, whether they're lopsided matchups or hacks or, someone's just having an off day or something, and it tends to not live up to expectations. But this series I was very interested in, knowing that even if it wasn't going to be a technically good series, it'd at least be interesting. But this one wound up being interesting and good, so I was very happy with that, and it just prompted me to make this video, because sometimes you just gotta see some good Pokemon. It's good to see battles in action as opposed to just rambling about the theory, abstract side of it. And really engage in the battles, because I know sometimes in my videos I just slap battles on screen, so there can be something to watch while I don't look at them because they distract about what I ramble about. But this is, what the video is about, so I am actually looking at the screen for once. So, what else makes this series interesting, a number of things actually, is that there are stakes involved, and that means both players are going to be trying. Because, yes, it is a tournament game, but sometimes players just join tournaments and aren't really super invested in it or motivated in it, and then they just kind of autopilot, and they say, yeah, I don't really care, whatever, and you wind up not really taking it too seriously. Not to say that you can't have great Pokemon battles that are just like friendlies or ladder games or, less important tournaments or whatever, but you get, in a tournament setting like this, then you have people really, really trying. And that tends to make it more engaging, and that's the other thing I wanted to mention, that this is not just for any tournament; it's for an invitational tournament with cash on the line. So this is not just for pride. This is like, hey, I could get a couple bucks. So, and then obviously there's also the personal pride aspect of it. But what really makes this intriguing is that this is a battle between two players who have really made Gen 5 their home. Sometimes you'll get tournament games, and I'm not saying these can't be great too, but you'll get tournament games between two players who don't really main the tier. They don't really build their teams in it. They just kind of get them from their friends. And they know the metagame well, of course, but I find it so much more interesting when it's two players who are really invested in the tier. They think about it, they build in it, they play it a lot just to play it. And I find that when they have their own point of view on the tier, then you get a really, really unique, interesting clash. Not that I would ever be against seeing two standard teams crash into each other. I think that kind of stuff is really interesting, to just like break down every detail of that kind of matchup. But when you have guys like this playing and really giving it their all, then you tend to see a lot of boundaries being pushed, and then you think, oh, it can be done that way. So, and this is especially the case here, not just because these two guys are Gen 5 OU mains. That's such a that did not used to be an expression used in the Pokemon world. That must have come from other games. But yeah, they have been, sorry, I tried to say 50 things at the same time again. My mind's just all over the place. So, they're both Gen 5 OU mains, and they both have a penchant for creativity, sometimes very much to a fault. They go way overboard with it and really shoot themselves in the foot by trying to do too much or getting a little too wild. But, of course, they take those kinds of risks sometimes when they try to branch out, but they also have a lot of success with it. So it really depends on how far they're pushing that creativity and to what ends and all that kind of stuff. So with all that in mind, I am thrilled to get into our little adventure here. So we've got Rain versus Weatherless Offense. Rain is favored in these kinds of things. Should it have appropriate measures for the setup sweepers that Weatherless Offense is generally going to chuck at them, which can be deceptively tough because of how crazy things like Volcarona can be. And sometimes Rain teams don't want to run Scarfers, and DD Knight suddenly becomes scary. If it sets up for free on Ferrothorn, and you want to have Gyro Ball on the Ferrothorn, but then you don't fit a lot of other moves, and it's a tough give and take to build. See, that's why I don't mind the standards crashing into each other as much, because it's the little tweaking of these details that makes the nuances of the battles themselves so interesting. But with McMegan, we aren't seeing a standard Rain team. There's no Tentacruel in sight. There's an Excadrill where Tentacruel might usually be. But the combination of Tentacruel, Starmie, and now you have Excadrill, Starmie. But the basic idea is that if you don't have Starmie as your spinner, then it becomes much more threatening. Because when you have Starmie, yes, it's a great offensive threat and it spins, awesome. But when you are able to just unleash it as an offensive threat, then the game opens up so much for you. So we got Excadrill there. It doesn't couple cool things for Rain, but we don't know the specifics of what that set is or how it was designed to support this team. We don't know if it has rocks so that Ferrothorn can just focus on spikes and running Gyro Ball, for example, or if it's something else like the standard EQ spin. Yeah, I can't really see it using Iron Head to too much effect. So like a Mold Breaker Rocks thing sounds pretty good to me. But hey, you don't know. So McMegan's team is the kind of team that looks fairly standard at team preview, but knowing his style, then you can definitely count on seeing something that's going to be unusual that will really punish the opponent because they don't know that it's coming until after it's hit them. Whereas Dice tends to be more on the side of you see the creative. Not to say that you don't see his creativity, until after you've been hit by it, but a lot of the time you already see it in the team builder. He goes for the more outlandish Pokemon choices. Not even outlandish like he's using like NU Pokemon or anything, but in just that Pokemon you wouldn't usually see on these styles. It's the way he combines these unusual pokes that throws you off. Just a little, it's a jarring off-kilter effect that you have right from team preview, and that can be disorienting to play against, especially when you're dealing with a team as high-powered as his is here. You got your two dragons, you got your Shell Smash Cloyster, and you've got Starmie and Jirachi as support. But then it's rounded out by Conkeldurr, which has been seeing some more respect in Gen 5 as of late. It's kind of been thought of as not fully a joke, but definitely like not really an OU Pokemon. But I mean, people have been experimenting with it more lately and saying, yeah, this thing actually causes a lot of havoc. So the simple way to break this down is that McMegan is going to actually Politoed is a great lead, not just because it gets up Rain and it's going to be unchallenged, unless Dice has a weather move on his team somewhere. But I can't with Cloyster for Sand and Dragonite and Starmie for Rain, then it's I don't know what weather move he would slot on that team really to mess with opposing weather. So it's unlikely. So not only do you get the Rain up unchallenged as McMegan, but you also are actually kind of difficult to beat one-on-one for Dice's team. So yeah, and whereas Dice is just gonna be, look, I gotta get up my hazard. My hazard. I was gonna say hazards, and then I stopped myself and said hazard singular because it's just gonna be rocks. I don't think that Cloyster's gonna have spikes. This isn't Ubers. So yeah, get up rocks and then just start overwhelming with Chomp, which could very likely be Sash, which could take away a revenge kill from Latios or Starmie or Thunderous Therian, and just overwhelm between Chomp, Conk, D-Knight, and Cloyster as well. And it looks like Dice has the tools. He's got what's likely a bulky Politoed because Scarf is terrible. Necessary Evil sometimes, but bulky is just so much better. And yeah, Ferrothorn can live hits, and he's got the speed and power, so let's dive into it. there's Politoed, there's Jirachi. We don't know what kind of Rachi this is going to be. Dice likes Scarf, but he is... But it's also could just be like a Rocks mixed Jirachi, as is more regular. And we see Light Screen, so that's an unusual choice already, and it's a cool one because a lot of what holds Hyper Offense back against Rain is getting blown away by the high-powered attacks that you have no recompense against because you are a frail Hyper Offense team against some of the strongest attacks in the game. And with screens, then you can deal with that a lot more easily, especially Light Screen, you know, against Lottie, Thun, Starmie, Keldeo, things like that. But of course, Reflect is going to be useful in all sorts of situations as well. Like suddenly, Reflect up and Ice Shard from Mamo isn't threatening your Chomp or D-Knight. So there's he's getting out of there, going right to Cloyster, and that Exeggutor does in fact set up rocks. So it is safe. So Ferrothorn does not have to, so that's a cool call. And the Exeggutor was in fact Mold Breakers for weird Xatu stalls. Nice, so Cloyster Shell Smashes right away, and comes Politoed. With the Light Screen, it's not fearing Scald as much, because Cloyster's special defense is bad, especially when it's weakening it naturally. And so even a resisted Scald in Rain is going to chunk it pretty nicely most of the time. But it's under Light Screen, so he really only has to fear the burn, but that burn does not go off because McMegan encores and then protects out of range of the second Icicle Spear, which is doing heavy damage. Maybe it's Adamant Never Melt Ice or something. But of course it could also be a specially defensive Politoed, which is a good set to help deal with sand and deal with that permanent rain issue of Latios being the most broken thing ever. So Scald, no burn, protect, Icicle Spear, encore ends, and down it goes. So now McMegan goes to Starmie, and that's like, okay, you have a full health Ferrothorn, and as outrageous as it seems, that Starmie is going to be Scarf, or he's bluffing Scarf, and he's just so confident that Dice is not going to stay in, because Starmie would get put away in a second by a +2 Rock Blast. So you would think, I'll just take it with Ferrothorn and, KO it back, right? It's like, oh no, that Starmie is coming in. Light Screen has worn off now. And Dice stays in and dies to Surf because he doesn't have any confident switch-ins to this Scarf Starmie under Rain with rocks up. Because, again, frail Hyper Offense against Rain. But he knew it was coming and made sure we knew because, as you see in the chat, you really loaded Scarf Starmie into Hyper Offense. And I mean, it's a good call on McMegan's end because if Hyper Offense is running around with all these insane sweepers, then Scarf Starmie is going to outspeed them and it hits them hard. And yeah, so he just really had to wait for that. That made that encore really smart because it prevented the Cloyster from shell smashing a second time. All he had to do, and that's why he protected even. Because I wasn't really paying attention the first time I watched this. I was like, oh, why did he protect? Did that really do anything? It's like, oh, he was waiting for the Light Screen to run out. Very cool. So that's what that whole, you encore, you break, you protect to get out of the second one and burn a turn of Light Screen. And then you take the second Icicle Spear and you Scald. You don't care if you don't get the burn because you're just burning Light Screen turns as opposed to burning the Cloyster. Not that you'd say no to burning the Cloyster, obviously. But you burn another turn of Light Screen, and then you protect because it can't smash again because it has been encored into Icicle Spear. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that was very well executed by McMegan. And now Dice is in an uncomfortable position, going to his own Starmie after having sacrificed that, and he spins as Ferrothorn comes in, and that generally this is the danger sign for Rain, which is if Ferrothorn, gets up spikes or whatever here, then Dragonite comes in. And it's not coming in, though, because Jirachi comes in on the spike, so multiple layers are going up. But if Excadrill doesn't get up those rocks... I mean, D-Knight can also switch in as Excadrill gets up rocks, and depending on the set, that can be just as troublesome as Ferrothorn. So what McMegan chooses to do, rather than that scenario, is to knock off, and that's nice because it removes Jirachi's Light Clay. So if I'm remembering my mechanics right, since the Light Screen was used with Light Clay still in effect, then it is going to be maximum duration. But now a potential Reflect won't be light clay boosted, so it'll just be regular. But what also makes it interesting is that he can just stay in against this Jirachi, and oh, I guess he doesn't. I thought he was going to stay and just try to burn more screens turns and not let Dragonite come in for free on a knockoff, because there goes your multi-scale, and that makes it easier for Starmie to deal with. But he does go to Excadrill now on the Reflect, which, okay, yeah, looks like... Oh, wait, no, never mind. The turn thing of 3 or 6 turns, that's based on what we might know before it's revealed to be Light Clay or not. So, D-Knight does not come in here. Instead, Conkeldurr does, and Rocks go up. So Conk is going to get a free bulk up with dual screen. And really, Light Screen is the big one here, because what holds Conk back? It's subpar special defense. Latios comes in, and Conk is not going to stay in on it, shockingly. And McMega makes a great move and goes for Roar there. That was a tough move to make, because if that Conk has Ice Punch, then you just... I mean, I guess he was just counting on it not Ice Punching, because if it even has Ice Punch, which is a big if, then you would go for Payback anyway, because it's stronger. No sense in not KOing the Latios with Ice Punch when you could KO it with Payback, right? Although, since Latios can run Colbur Berry, but then again, Latios runs Colbur Berry more on Sand teams than Rain. So, but either way, it was a good call, because, and you can see here that McMegan's timer really was going down to 20 seconds before he made that move. So he was really thinking about it. You know, and Dice is hitting 60, so it's tough either way. He didn't just switch that Conk out immediately. He was really thinking about it. I don't know what he was afraid of, like getting tricked and then being locked into Payback against Pharaoh or Exca. I'm not sure, but either way, he did not want to... I guess he was trying to absorb the trick with Starmie, because then he thought, oh, I'll get the spin-off, and then I will be able to launch Conk against him again, supported by screens, but this time he won't be able to trick me with Latios. So my guess is that he was thinking about trying to get another setup with Conk without Latios being able to stop it by sacrificing itself and tricking. So... that's an interesting one, but the Latios doesn't trick. It's assumed specs if the Starmie's going to be Scarf. And instead it roars, which is a great choice on Sand, but you don't really see it much on Rain, but it works out nicely here. But yeah, that was a tough call to make. I think he said, look, if that Conk has Ice Punch, then I think I might just have to accept that it's going to destroy me, because Dracoing into it with an unboosted Latios with Light Screen up is not really going to change much. And I think if it's Ice Punch, then it's not hitting as hard as Payback, so there's a better chance you live it anyway. So yeah, Roar was a great move there, and it roars at the Starmie and brings in Chomp. So interesting here, because with Light Screen, Chomp does have the capacity to live an unboosted Lati Draco Meteor. And I don't know if that's a roll or not, and I'm not in the headspace to hit the calc, even though I absolutely would if this was a serious tournament game. But yeah, he can't exactly switch around this Chomp, so he's just going to go for a Draco. So look, the Latios did very good work, and he doesn't even get hit in return, because the Chomp reveals itself to be the Rocker, and it just gets rocks, so it now chunks the Thundurus. It chunks a little bit of everything. It's interesting because... I don't know what his dragon move was. I guess it depends on the follow-up, though. He is going to follow it up by spinning with Starmie, so now he has a hazard advantage. So that was a nice move, and I guess he valued that more highly. Yeah, taking advantage of the -2 Latios as opposed to KOing it outright and not having rocks. Because, I mean, I'm falling into that trap that sometimes players get. It's like, oh, why did they get rocks when they could have? It's like, well, because rocks do things that you just don't see coming until you've played the rest of the game. You're like, oh yeah, rocks did all that. So I think it's fair here because it's later in the game. But actually, no, there is a direct advantage, and if you get up rocks and Light Screen, then Conk can make its way through Thunderous Therian much more easily if it doesn't have Ice Punch. So that's a big one. So that was a good set of rocks. Plus, there is the chance that he switches. I don't think that because what's he going to switch to, really? But, like, Pharaoh, possibly. And I think that might have even been a decent move, because he doesn't really need Pharaoh for much else. Like, it's not really dealing with Jirachi in a way that X can't handle. It's not doing anything to Conk. You don't want it, dealing with Dragon. I guess if it has Gyro Ball, then maybe. So that one's up in the air. Yeah, and Starmie, I mean, you can sack against Starmie and then throw... Because what you want to do is get up the rocks and then throw your Scarf Starmie at Dice over and over again. The problem is that Dice's Starmie is getting the rocks off and not being met with a rocker that can get him back up immediately. Because, I mean, if the Ferrothorn could get him back up immediately, then at least that would force D-Knight in right away, and then you go from there. But here, the Ferrothorn gets up hazards, and the D-Knight is still going to be a problem later. So it's a dual-pronged attack between the Conkeldurr right now and then the D-Knight afterwards. So in comes Latios, this time unencumbered by Light Screen. And now Conk is going to... Wow, that Draco would have done nothing with Light Screen. And it does have Ice Punch, and it KOs with the rocks. So here comes Thundurus, faster, not fearing the Mach Punch. And it doesn't even use Mach Punch. So, Thunder, cool. Now here comes Starmie again. That balloon really coming in handy as it ignores the spikes. But Ferrothorn gets thrown into it again and misses a Power Whip. Let's see if that... misses 2. That is unfortunate. And gets cripped by the Ice Beam. Goodness gracious. I don't know if that's going to realistically make a difference. I mean, if it has Gyro Ball, then... it very well could make a difference against this Dragonite in Rain because of how little Fire Punch can do. But he goes right to Starmie instead and unleashes Trick just to lock it into a move and deal with it that way. I mean, at this point, really, if that D-Knight locked itself in Outrage, Excadrill doesn't really hurt it, and especially with multi-scale attack, my god. And Ferrothorn dies, and then Thundurus dies. So he very feasibly could have gone to just gone for the Outrage, because I mean Ice Beam's not KOing. Yeah, so Ice Beam into Iron Barbs, that's not KOing either. So part of me wonders, but it's slow U-turns and a Dragonite, and now it is going to have to deal with. Oh no, just E-speeds too. Okay, that was nicely set up. Yeah, I can get behind that for sure. Still not sure though. I don't remember how this ends. I only glanced at it once earlier, and I liked it, which is why I'm doing the video on it. But yeah, I'm thinking like, yeah, that was a nice way to dispatch the Starmie without losing multi-scale, but. Yeah, Thundurus is going to HP Ice now, and D-Knight has no choice but to DD. God, that does a ton. And now it's going to Outrage. And then, yeah, it's going to Outrage into the Thundurus. Yeah, it outrages into the Thundurus. And then it's locked in, and then Excadrill takes it out if it has Iron Head. Maybe he's banking on it not having Iron Head. And in that case, he's fine. But yeah, and then if the Excadrill beats it one-on-one, then the Jirachi obviously is going to be beaten as well. I mean, I guess it's Scarf, but I don't see D-Knight Outrage into Exca plus like this newly Scarf Jirachi Iron Head. It even has Iron Head. It might have Healing Wish. I can't really see much practical use for Iron Head in most situations here. The whole point is dual screen, slow U-turns, then Healing Wish later to give you more of the threats you already have. So yeah, I think outraging earlier might have been a better move, because now you would just be outraging right away. No, never mind. Ignore me, because if it Ice Beams. And actually, now I don't even know if it matters, because either way you have to crit the Excadrill. Because yeah, if the Starmie Ice Beams, and if the Starmie Ice Beams, and D-Knight loses multi-scale, and then you have the exact same situation it's in now against the Thunderous. So there you go. You was just in that kind of death position to begin with. I guess he was really, really hoping for the Starmie to go for Ice Beam as Jirachi switched in, which would be the ideal scenario. But McMegan made a great move by going for a trick there. And he even sacrifices the Ferrothorn on the Forced Outrage to get that Iron Barbs in. Great move. Yeah, that was a really great move. I guess it really, there is that other... On that turn, if he thinks, look, Extra isn't going to KO me from 41. So yeah, actually, no, that was a nice setup there. Yeah, but then again, it still doesn't really matter, because if you Outrage on the Thunderous, then the Ferrothorn sacrifices itself anyway to get you in Iron Barb's range. To Iron Barbs it, rather. Or, hell, you could even go to Excadrill, Iron Head, and if it doesn't KO, then you go to Ferrothorn and Iron Barbs after, so you're safe. So you could have just stayed in with Thunderous there, which is why Dice went for Outrage. And knowing that Dice was really forced into that Outrage, then that's why McMegan went to Ferrothorn. I guess Dice could have said, I have no choice but to hope that Ferrothorn comes in on like a kind of choke, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. I wouldn't call it so harshly, but... and then I DD again, but... Yeah, so... Yeah, now Excadrill comes in... Oh, and he gets crit by the... Yeah, so that was kind of what it was boiling down to either way. Which is unfortunate, and that's going to be the game. Well, that was a really intense one either way. If I was in the mood to break it down more seriously, I think... Or more... seriously, this was a serious breakdown. Just more, more long-term, because this was more a turn-by-turn, not to say turn-by-turn without an emphasis on the big picture, of course, but just to see where McMegan locked it in to get to this point where it was always going to be D-Knight desperately doing this whole dance, I think... Because it was, like the scenarios we were just breaking down, it was always going to come down to D-Knight against that Excadrill scenario, with that heartbreaking crit, of course. But now it's just making me think, I think Conk should have stayed in against the Latios earlier. And I think he, with the light screen up, that was big. Because, if you don't have that, if you get rid of Latios there, then you still have your Garchomp, and... Yeah, maybe with a Sash, even if you get the spin-off with Starmie. Yeah, and with the Healing Wish Jirachi, then you can get Conk back. That's kind of the idea. So I think that Conk should have stayed in and just wiped out the Latios. Or at least damaged it, It would have been more worthwhile. Locking into +1 Ice Punch if it tricks you is fine, because it's still... then the next turn it either dies anyway and doesn't do that much damage because Light Screen, or it doesn't damage you at all, and it's still switching into a +1 Ice Punch with a team that doesn't particularly appreciate it. So, even if it's not doing a million damage, it's still chunking it nicely. And you appreciate that because you're not really taking damage while that's happening. So, let's go to Game 2. This is an interesting one. And we've got the very unique case of Kyurem-Black into a Hail team. And a Hail team looking like it was ripped straight out of 2013, funnily enough, with the use of Fortress there. But, yeah, it's also a very slow team on Dice's end. Unless even if the Lando T is Scarf, which it almost surely isn't going to be, because he needs the physically defensive backbone against a whole host of things. Not that he doesn't have other recourse against those things with things like the dual Ice Shard. Obama might not Ice Shard, but the Ice Shard from Mamo, the Hail Chip... Slowking can help out, 4-8 Heatran in a sense. It'd be funny if it was Scarf Heatran. But, yeah, it's a slow team, but McMegan doesn't really have the fast wall breakers that would really make you pay in that kind of situation. Like the Terrakions and such. But he does have a wall breaker in the form of Kyurem-Black. And other than that, it's the kind of team that makes you think, why is this a rain team? I know Tentacruel is good, but... It's just it's very lacking in, the kind of, There's no Lottie, there's no Keldeo or another water abuser like Starmie or Azumarill or Feraligatr or Gyarados. There's no Tornadus, there's no Thundurus Therian. So there's no Aquatail Garchomp. So, but hey, never doubt. I mean, no, you can doubt great players if they're doing something that makes it worth doubting. But give them the benefit of the doubt, let's say. So Pharaoh into Landoli. This is also always interesting to see Obama into Politoed because this is supposed to be Hale's go-to advantage. Why you're using it. Also interesting to see a Hale team that doesn't have emphasis on Magic Guard because the idea is that Magic Guard obviously is immune to passive damage, including Hale, and Hale will wear down even Sand immune checks to Magic Guard things. Like suddenly Skarmory is losing health, Gliscor is not losing health but is not gaining as much as it otherwise would. Other things have if they're not losing health, then they're having their leftovers neutered if it's a lefty Skarm, or losing health if it's a Rocky Helmet Skarm. So interesting to see an approach that's not all about the Magic Guard and more about facilitating Mamoswine. Because if you've got like a Skarmory dealing with Mamo in Hale, and then good luck. So we got Rocks from Lando, Rocks from Pharaoh. This time it is going to be the Rocker. So leaving us to wonder what kind of Jirachi is that. If it's some sort of Calm Mind Jirachi, that's another Rain abuser. It's just when you see Jirachi on Rain, you tend to think, especially defensive support a lot of the time. So there's a knockoff. There go Fori's lefty. So it is not going to be able to maintain hazards off permanently. So that's a big, especially in the face of Ferrothorn's Iron Barbs. And it's going to get up spikes as Tentacle comes in early without the Rain. And it's going to go for a Scald, looking for that burn because Scald is cool. And Fori goes for EQ, which is a great choice on Fori. Doesn't mess with Magnezone so much because you have to break its balloon first, but Heatran tends to be very irritating to Hale teams. Like if your check is something like a combination of Slowking, your own Heatran, and Lando, then a standard Lava Plume, Earth Power, Toxic Heatran is gonna give you nightmares. So, and obviously Heatran loves to switch it on Fori, so it's a great way of baiting it in and doing something to it. And also lets Fori do something one-on-one against Excadrill, meaning you can actually leverage that great defense stat you have. And hitting T-Tar is pretty good as well as other things like Terrakion. But Heatran and Excadrill are the two main ones. So it's got an EQ for Tenna there. It's going to protect to get out of range of that EQ because the first one did 51. Now it's at 55. So the question is, are you going to go for that burn, or are you going to spin and make sure you get rid of the rocks and spikes at least temporarily? Make Dice work to put them back up. And he's going to go for that second Scald, no burn, and this time the EQ KOs cleanly without a crit or anything. So, and McMegan is not pleased with that. So I don't know if he didn't calc the roll or if that Fori has... I would be surprised that Fori has attack investment. Fori has EV issues as is because it wants to have some semblance of special defense, but it also wants max defense. If you've got HP Ice Fori, yes, that used to be a thing. Then you even want a few special attack EVs on it. So yeah, I don't know what happened there, but now McMegan is permanently dealing with rocks and one layer of spikes, at least. Fori is going to get forced out here, and it's slow, so the odds of it getting a second layer of spikes, if McMegan plays aggressively with his own Pharaoh, not the worst. And Fori being this weakened, the upside of that, yes, losing Tentacle, dealing with these hazards uncontested now, bad. The upside, you've weakened Fori, and it doesn't have lefties, and it's very slow, obviously. So now it is going to be very easy for McMegan to stack spikes of his own, and seeing as Dice's Weather Setter is weak to rocks and McMegan's is not, then that can be a major advantage. Also, obviously, good for helping wear down the other Pokemon on Dice's team. So in comes Obama, eating the rocks, eating another Scald, which could cut into its longevity even more, but no burn. And going for another one just because he's... Alright, so Dice, he catches Dice trying to Blizzard as Ferrothorn switch. You could have gone to... I guess if it's a Calm Mind Jirachi, you want to be careful with its health. Although, as long as that Heatran's healthy, it's not doing much. And he catches it, and he's just going for that Scald. I don't know if he's tilting at this point or what, but it's I mean, it's still very much a doable game, but you can sense that kind of frustration when you see someone going for that Scald over and over. And, you know, in a horrifying twist, then the Blizzard actually freezes. Now, Scald does thaw you out, one of the few good things about Scald, but it also means that McMegan has to use Scald here, otherwise he's switching Politoed out. You know, the Abomasnow switch was aggressive, but also came with the benefit of cutting off Politoed's leftovers recovery, which is crucial for the Weather War. You know, and if you Leech Seed, then you get more health back on your Abomasnow. That's another strength of Obama that you can heal. It's the only Weather Setter that can heal, not directly, because it's not as direct as Pout on Slack Off, but it's more direct than, like, Protect and Lefties, for example. So, and obviously, if you think Ferrothorn's going to try to stuff your Leech Seed or your Giga Drain, then you can just Blizzard it, wear it down. So, yeah, that was an interesting dynamic there. But now McMegan is going to have to Scald and... Yeah, he burns... Does he burn? No, he doesn't burn. I thought he did. So, and now he gets Giga Drained, so he goes 0 for 5 on Scald Burns, which is brutal, and even gets frozen in the process. And Giga Drains goes down. Abomasnow is the Weather War winner, and this is really not looking good. So the McMegan's only chance is to go for some sort of miracle with Kyurem-Black. And here we're going to see the unique threat that Kyurem-Black presents, in that it's hail immunity, you know, something that very rarely comes into play, is going to shine, because whenever you, on the few occasions that I have seen a tournament battle with Kyurem-Black against a hail team, then the Kyurem-Black always winds up being insane. Like the biggest one I can remember, 2013 World Cup Finals, Dragon User versus White Queen. And, you know, Dragon User had a Life Orb Kyurem-Black, and he's facing this hail team of White Queens, and just firing off these Life Orb attacks and not caring about the hail at all. That makes it so scary. Obviously, that's why you like Rain, because on Kyurem-Black team, because it means you're not bothered by the otherwise ever-present sand. But it's especially nice against a hail team. And, you know, so I guess in that sense, I remember that thing earlier about, oh, it doesn't even really abuse the rain. Well, that can kind of, I mean, it's going to be bad for Jirachi for sure. It's not going to be healing with its own lefties. But if there's something that can turn it against Dice, it's this Kyurem. Because suddenly your Slowking is not going to be able to deal with it, because if Rain is up... Now, I don't know if that was exactly a tactical sack of Politoed, because you can deal with the Abomasnow without sacrificing your Politoed. You know, you can keep the hail up if you really want to. I mean, it is funny to think about Politoed not wanting to keep the Rain up in this battle for the benefit of Kyurem, but you don't have to sack your Politoed to do that, you know. But, yeah, now Slowking, if it is going to be dealing with Kyurem-Black, if it's going to be like a set without Fusion Bolt or something, or like Heatran dealing with it, if it is a set without Earth Power, which many of them are. Because nowadays, like the old Kyurem-Black set used to have both, Sub, Ice Beam, Fusion Bolt, Earth Power, and that would actually be a terror for Dice's team right now, because Fori, you know, the supposed check is on death's door and it hits everything else super effectively. But that set got so decidedly phased out by the rise of Choice Band on Dragmag that now you see a Kyurem-Black on Rain and you don't think, oh, it's sub 3 attacks. You think, what is that going to do? Because if you saw sub Roost, most of the time it would be Kyurem, like base Kyurem, because of its stronger Ice Beams, significantly stronger Ice Beams, and access to pressure. Whereas Kyurem-Black, you don't really know what it doesn't really have as much of a discernible advantage in that, with that kind of set. I mean, the higher physical defense, cool, but yeah. Funnily enough, if it is that set of Sub, Ice Beam, Fusion Bolt, Earth Power, it does not heal, and it heals passively with lefties, which is nice, but it does not have the tools to threaten Abomasnow in this one-on-one, so Dice's lack of a true Kyurem-Black check can be played around by the fact that the Kyurem-Black was just sent into the Abomasnow, and the Abomasnow actually deals with it one-on-one, you know, better than anything else on Dice's team might. So, What are we going to see? We see a roost right away. So, okay, well, that could be a roost 3 attacks, which seems unusual, but possible. But it also means that, yes, this Kyurem is going to be healing. So, and there we just see another Blizzard. That was a good move on Dice's end to not give it a free sub, in case it tried to sub on Leech Seed. And now the Kyurem sub. So it is a sub-roost Kyurem-Black, and Dice goes for the Leech Seed. That one, I get, but just like making McMegan show that you have it, because it's like, okay, if it's sub-roost, it's going to be sub-roost Ice Beam Earth Power, and that's the classic Kyurem, sub-roost Kyurem, I should say, and Slowking sits on that forever, so it's not really that punishing if you are able to, if you do give it that sub. You know, I guess you might get scared if it's that old set that base Kyurem ran in Gen 5 UU, when it was first in the tier. Yeah, Kyurem was in UU. It was hilarious. It was Sub-Roost, I tried to say Hone Claws and Dragon Tail at the same time. Jesus Christ. Hone Claws and Dragon Tail. And then that could be scary. But, I mean, at least with that, you can intimidate it with Lando. And, like, you have Mamo hitting it hard because it hits you with negative priority. So you're not really too scared of either Ice Beam Earth Power or Hone Claws Dragon Tail. So giving this Kyurem that free sub is not the worst thing in the world. So I see why Dice went for that Leech Seed. It was a good move, just to really force the issue. You know, because if it is a sub 3 attacks, you want to start, you know, wearing it down, as opposed to just blizzarding it forever and getting Roost stalled out as it beats you down. So now a Roost, the sub is broken by the next Blizzard, and now McMegan goes for another sub, and Blizzard is breaking it. And it's just so cool to see Kyurem healing in Hail. It's so weird when a Gen 9 Pokemon heals in Snow, because Snow isn't Hail, so it doesn't damage. What is that? Anyway, Blizzard, although they did finally do that thing where it boosts defense. That was so long overdue. But yeah, the Blizzard is down to half its PP right now, down to 4. And McMegan now goes to Lando on another sub, which is an interesting choice. I guess he wants to. No, that was a good move because it's going to sub, guaranteed, and now he forces the Kyurem to reveal what kind of sub-roost Kyurem it is. He's going to. Oh, the Lando is buffeted by the hail, and it goes first, and it U-turns, breaks the sub with U-turn at that. So it looks like it is a Scarf Lando. So that's very cool. If it's I do stand by that thing earlier from the team preview, where, yes, you do need Lando's physically defensive support against all those things. But what I overlooked was the fact that you need Lando to be your rocker, because you don't want to stick it on Heatran or 4 if you can help it, because of, you know, the whole Excadrill of it all. So, but Rock's Scarf Lando is a good compromise, giving you some speed while maintaining that support. And I overlooked one of my old favorite sets that I love to use, which was physically defensive Scarf Lando, which gives you the best of both worlds. So, yeah, that's a good choice on Dice's end. U-turn, I don't know if that crit might have mattered in terms of breaking sub, because Kyurem B is pretty physically defensive, or physically bulky naturally, but who knows. Either way, Heatran comes in and eats an Ice Beam and is not healing it off. It's so weird to see Heatran not healing or just not healing with lefties, because Hail is so rare. But here you see that unique advantage of Kyurem's, as it subs on a Lava Plume. And yeah, so he doesn't know. Is Heatran trying to... Is it like daring it to use Earth Power or something? I guess the idea is if... I mean, you're willing... Because Heatran can live 1 Earth Power, and then it'll Lava Plume, and Kyurem will be in hazard range, and then you finish it off with Lando. And between Scarf, Lando, and Mamo, then you should be able to deal with Jirachi, so it's worth finding out what that set is with Heatran. So, Lava Plume does not burn, and really forcing McMegan to show that Earth Power. And he does not go for it, and in comes Lando, and that gets burned. So that's nasty. Is it still going to force out the Heatran? Very possible. It does. So it is going to get another layer of rocks, or round of rocks on the Heatran at least. But, oh yeah, I guess you're also really not scared of the Jirachi because it's not healing in Hail. So now, in comes Kyurem-Black back into the Lando taking heavy hazard damage, but it is going to live in EQ from that range because it is very physically bulky. And in comes Heatran again on the Roost. So now he's just thinking, what is this last? What could it be? And Lava Plume goes first, and Kyurem-Black reveals Dragon Tail. And that is a very, very unusual set. I don't think I've ever seen that particular sub-roost set on Kyurem, base Kyurem or Black Kyurem. So you've got the phasing, which is rare in Gen 5OU to begin with if your name isn't Skarmory. And it's going to get around. What makes that interesting and what really changes this dynamic is that it is going to be a set that wears down Heatran, should it avoid burns like it just did from Lava Plume again. But it also is going to be able to wear down Slowking. Like, maybe it's not going to beat Slowking one-on-one necessarily, but what it does do with Rocks and Hail is drag in everything else and force it to be KO'd until Slowking is the only Pokemon left, and then once the Slowking is isolated, then McMegan will be able to deal with it between his other Pokemon, if he's smart about it. So this Kyurem, I mean, we were just dissecting, like, Sub-Roost, Ice Beam, Earth Power, or Sub-Roost, Hone Gloss, Dragon Tail, but neither of those really could mount the comeback that... they didn't have the assortment of traits that were needed to mount the comeback against Dice's particular team, whereas this never-before-seen unique set of McMegans, that hyped it up way too much. I'm sorry, that was a little obsequious of me. But this combination of moves is exactly what he needs. I mean, it's not going to be automatic by any means. He's still got to, have some finesse and, a little bit of luck in terms of avoiding Lava Plume burns. But it does give the potential for that comeback at least. So let's see if he can pull it off. And, I mean, in terms of avoiding Lava Plume burns, he did also go 0 for 5 on Scald. So, and Lando got burned too, so... Anyway, the Kyurem is faster than Mamo, and what's interesting here is that Mamo has the Thick Fat ability, which means it has a resistance to ice most of the time. You don't really see it come into action too much. You see it once in a while when you switch into like a Thunder's HP Ice, and it does nothing, and you're like, oh yeah, it resists that. But what's funny is that Kyurem-Black's ability is Terravolt, which is basically Mold Breaker, which means it ignores Thick Fat, so Ice Beam just hits it regularly, and it is going to 2-hit KO. And that EQ, I mean, definitely hits for decent damage, but doing a mere 41, and it's at this point that you realize, oh, right, you don't really notice it so much because Kyurem-B is so weak to passive, damage that it winds up getting KO'd by everything, especially in the fast-paced games that involve, sacrificing it after it gets a KO and Drag Mag. But if you get, like, this very rare isolated scenario like this, where it kind of slows the game down to a controllable pace, that... then you see, oh yeah, this thing is actually really good at taking hits. So it can even pop a Roost off here and get some more lefties back because the Mamo is hitting it for, low mid-40s. So it is getting back up to a little over half health here. And now he finishes it off with the Ice Beam, not getting Ice Sharded. So out of Scarf Lando T range, and now it's just going to be back to Heatran. But notice, look how quickly, like, Heatran is famous for getting back to, you always say, you get the Heatran down to 20, and then 3 turns later it's back at full because of protecting lefties, right? But look at once you have Hail in the picture, it just gets phased out by a not very effective Dragon Tail a couple times, eating just rocks and Dragon Tail, and look, it's already down to half health. So now it's just... Oh, Kyurem roosts up, eating that first Lava Plume for very little damage, only 25, avoiding another burn. The burns are really not happening in this game, and they continue to not happen as it avoids yet another Lava Plume burn, and Dragon Tails the Heatran out for 12. It's going to be at 20 next time it comes in. Next time it comes in is its last. Before he comes in, does not take hail damage because of Overcoat, but doesn't matter, it's an Ice Beam range. And Kyurem-Black picks up another round of lefties. And in comes Heatran again. And Lava Plume, no burn, Dragon Tails it out, down it goes. Now Lando T, I think it's going to be out of EQ range. Yep, oh my god, 30. That did nothing. So yeah, as if the Mamoswine thing wasn't as impressive, because if it is a bulky Scarf Lando T, it's going to be doing less. So now McMegan is finally forced to go to Slowking. But, I mean, at this point, Slowking is not going to do well against the Kyurem-B. Like, if the best move it could have here is Psychic or its own Dragon Tail, but Dragon Tail is so weak coming from Slowking, it's really just a phasing move. It's a great phasing move, but it's not going to be breaking the sub, even if, you know, nominally super effective against something as bulky as Kyurem-B. And the other, you know, best move it could have here would be like Psychic, because Kyurem-Black does not have infinite sub roost PP. But yeah, it is going to get up a sub on one turn against the Slowking and then Dragon Tail it out. And two Scalds don't even break it, so he is going to have to go for the Dragon Tail next time. As I think he had to go for the Dragon Tail there. Like, maybe he was afraid of not breaking it. I mean, he's crazy behind at this point anyway, as Kyurem-B has pretty much just solo carried this. But yeah, he subs again on the U-turning Lando, breaking the sub. But I mean, look, this is exactly what this Kyurem was supposed to do, as Crit Skull doesn't break, and details out. Heatran goes down. Slowking comes back in. Roost breaks because of that crit, but now it's not gonna. Scald's not. Oh, he can't Dragon Tail on the. That was foolish of me, I apologize. He can only Dragon Tail on the sub. He can't Dragon Tail as McMegan goes for Dragon Tail because McMegan's Kyurem is obviously faster. So, Detail gets a crit, but that's not really going to change much because Lando drops to Rocks and Hail. And now, you're just Ice Beaming on the Slack Off, probably, just to wear it down. But at this point, it's just... Oh, I skipped a turn, but it just subbed on the Slack Off. Yeah, let's just go back just so it's super clear. Sub, Slack Off, and now another Scald on the Detail. And, you know, you never see Dragon Tail running out of PP, but in this matchup it actually, you know, could. So Obama is actually more resilient to the rocks going on here because of its recovery and hail and its access to protect in conjunction with that. So it actually, with Slowking, can threaten to not stop the Kyurem-B rampage, but it's definitely slowing it down a little bit, although it can't do it forever, obviously. Also, if Kyurem-B switches out and removes its -1 attack from the Lando, then its Dragon Tails start actually doing damage, because you think, oh, the damage doesn't matter because it's not very effective on Heatran, and it's just a phasing mechanism that does a little bit of chip, blah, blah, blah. But then you're like, oh, right. Kyurem-B has one of the highest attack stats in the entire game, and it is still a stab move that has a pretty decent base power. So if you just switch out and sacrifice the Lando, then you get your sub, and now your Dragon Tail actually threatens the Slowking and the Abomasnow. You can at least Ice Beam the Abomasnow. You don't have to Dragon Tail that. But, yeah, you want to do that sooner rather than later because there's only 6 Dragon Tails remaining. How often do you see that? Dragon Tail threatening to run out of PP. Kind of hilarious. So, yeah, I mean, less subs and roosts now. So there's the sub, and there's another Dragon Tail. That's the first Dragon Tail miss we've seen, actually. And it brings it down to 5. But he just goes for sub there just to burn a turn of PP for dice and to, you know, get more lefties recovery without expending a Dragon Tail. That was a very nice move, actually. You don't need all your sub PP. And, I mean, you like it for sure. I think sacking Lando and getting some actually decently powered Dragon Tails in definitely would be... Because you lose nothing from sacking Lando, then you just sub with Kyurem again, you know, and you roost, whatever. But, yeah, the Dragon Tail drags Abomasnow in. And Dice tries the Leech Seed on an Ice Beam or Roost, but, I mean, he also has to be careful because Blizzard's running out of PP. And, yeah, so now he's just going to... Oh, wow, that Ice Beam does that does a lot. So, yeah, now the Obama... He had to hope that Obama was going to not pull anything. He had to hope that McMegan was going to mess it up a little bit. But, yeah, Obama drops to the second Ice Beam. He doesn't go back to Slowking. And now it's just, you know, Slowking against the world. But, yeah, Kyurem is just going to... Yeah, Kyurem finally switches. The Lando is sacked. And... Oh, it actually gets sacked on the Dragon Tail, and Kyurem gets dragged back in. That's hilarious. And now with the Intimidate, then the Dragon Tail will do even less to Kyurem-B subs. I mean, he only has 3 left, so... yeah, Roost... Oh, as the last move is revealed to be T-Wave. Yeah, so he's Roosts, Lando sacked, And now that he knows the last move is not Fire Blast or Flamethrower, which in fairness probably would have been used earlier, but now he knocks off the Slowking's leftovers, so it is going to be, worn down eventually. And Scald finally gets another burn, or well, get another burn. Scald gets a burn as opposed to the Lava Plume burn from earlier. But yeah, now Jirachi comes in, and it is going to be specially defensive. It shows Body Slam, so Slowking is going to get taken out. So yeah, those Kyurem heroics, that was pure McMegan in terms of how he engineered that comeback. And I just thought that Kyurem thing was special. I mean, this was a 67-turn game, and Kyurem was on the field for how many of those? Because I mean, it did that thing where it comes in and then doesn't switch out for a million turns. And those games like that are very rare. They're always great to see when the opponent is just trying to dance around it somehow. But yeah, Kyurem is in here. 1, 2. So from 9. So Kyurem stayed in from 9 to 17. 9 through 17. So that's 8. And now it's back in from 20 to... Wow, yeah, now it's... So the Kyurem does not switch out from turns 20 through... Wait, where was that? That it finally switched out. It stayed in for 36... That can't be... Yeah, 36 consecutive turns. That's actually hilarious. Yeah, so Kyurem 36 plus 8 is 44. And so yeah, Kyurem-Black was on the field for 44 turns. Well, it's going to come back in, obviously. And it subs and it roosts. So 46 turns. Yeah, so 46 out of the 67 turns in this game had Kyurem-Black on the field. And I mean, I know it's actually probably a little more than that because some turns ended with Kyurem-Black getting Dragon-Tailed in, for example. So, but yeah, I just think that whole 36-turn stretch of Kyurem just staying in and just muscling through everything was just beautiful. That's what made me want to make this video. Yeah, with -1 attack at that, with a physical move. Oh, that was just a thing of beauty. So, yeah, and the best part is there's still a third game of the series. And yeah, McMegan and Dice both have very, very similar brands of sand balance. McMegan is more traditional. This is actually a set of 6 Pokemon I think Dice was the first to use back in 2016. Whereas Dice is the more unusual choices where he's got a Breloom, which is almost surely going to be Toxic Orb, and a Dragonite. And Dragonite Sand is very, very rare. So Amoonguss gonna lead off and just start paralyzing things because that makes the offensive trio of Lando, Tarak, Exca really scary. And Slowking is going for some Scald burns because Scald is a great move. Giga, Scald again. There's the burn. And yeah, okay, leave me alone, God. Sorry, my computer's being annoying. Yeah, so Giga, Para, and he forces the switch and paralyzes the switch in. Now, I'm sure he was aiming for Breloom, and for those wondering, in Gen 5, Stunt Spore does paralyze grass types. But getting the Dragonite is also amazing, no matter what set it is, whether it's, offensive or support or whatever. And it looks like it's Choice Band. Choice Band on Sand now, that's rare. But it does a huge chunk to Lando, but it's going to U-turn out, break the multi-scale, and now Slowbro comes in, and it's -1, and it is going to take less than half, and the Dragonite is paralyzed and confused. Now I can double back to... I would say you can double back to Lando here and get up rocks on... I mean, even if he doesn't get up rocks, he'll get more lefties on the Lando, and you appreciate that after taking such a big hit. Oh, he goes to T-Tar. I think he was trying to catch the Slowking, but Breloom... Lando would have been good into that Breloom. But Breloom against T-Tar, not the end of the world. I mean, even though Amoonguss is burned. Actually, if the Breloom has Facade, it's actually terrifying. So he really needs those lefties back on Lando T. Especially because Amoonguss does not necessarily threaten Breloom very hard. and a nice double to Slowking there for just the regen, if nothing else. But also a good pivot on McMegan's end, getting those lefties back on Lando here, as opposed to just flailing around with Amoonguss while burned. You know, when Amoonguss is burned, you know, if you're not directly statusing something, then you need to not be attacking with it, because it's just going to give your opponent a chance to come back. So that was a very heads-up move by McMegan. He gets another he gets lefties, U-turn, and Slowking was a decent move because he gets to get some regen, and now Lando pivots in on the forced U-turn. So good moves both players, and in comes McMegan's own team. Yeah, you got a different slow twin on both sides. Cool stuff. Different grass on both sides, and then the Lando Exca T-Tar, obviously. And then your filler slot is D-Knight versus Tarak. So McMegan also pivots to Lando on the U-turn, and now Dice goes to T-Tar. And this is interesting, because if it's a Scarf T-Tar... First, I don't think it's a Scarf T-Tar. Like, yes, McMegan's team... Or, sorry, Dice's team would be on the slow side. I mean, it'd be on the slow side even with Scarf T-Tar. But without Scarf T-Tar, you are so much worse against Alakazam. It's not even funny. So, I think... either way, though, what you're threatening here as the T-Tar is Ice Beam. And any good player with a Lando is going to know that you're threatening the Ice Beam, and is going to switch if you think Scarf, or U-turn if you don't. And either way, that is when you get the very uncommon play of T-Tar pursuing Lando. That's surprisingly, or was a surprisingly common play back when. It sounds so absurd, T-Tar pursuing Lando, but it has been known to happen on several occasions. But he just switches. He hard switches, so he's definitely thinking Scarf. And it's not Ice Beam, but it is what we assume will be Scarf Stonage. Because if it's a support T-Tar, no reason not to run Rock Slide. You don't want to mess around with, you know, bad accuracy against... I mean, okay, Stonage does kill bulky Thundurus, whereas Rock Slide wouldn't. But you need Rock Slide's reliability if you're against the things you're going to use, like Volcarona. So Stone Edge, definitely a sign of Scarf. And makes a great pivot to Tarak. And Lando's at full health, so Tarak is not instantly going to rip through things, but still... Oh, it's not a... I like that choice a lot. I messed around with a couple teams back in 16 that had Rox Terrakion, because Rox Terrakion is generally thought of as like this hyper offense thing, right? But early in the game, like situations like this where they still have a healthy Terrakion check, you want to get it in on the field because it does a lot of things, like, you know, I mean, it checks Volcarona of all things, actually, or like Magma Heatran or something in sand. It's like, oh, well, I may as well take advantage of this by getting up rocks. And, of course, the premier spinner in the tier, Excadrill, wants nothing to do with the rocks Terrakion. Now, Terrak can't switch back into Excadrill, but hey, it's... At least you make sure the rocks go up for a while, as opposed to T-Tar, who invites Excadrill in like the plague. Not that you can't turn that to your advantage, but Rox T-Tar has other issues. And Tarak has the moveset flexibility, too, where you could really run double Stealth Rock, you know, on Lando and Tarak, because you're not really missing out on much else with your Tarak, and this just gives you more depth to your game. I mean, I prefer double Stealth Rock and DPP on a lot of teams, because that in-game flexibility is really, really important for adapting to different matchups. So whether it's his only rocker or whether it's dual rocks, I really approve of that Stealth Rock Tarak choice. And because if he's... You know, look how he's struggling in this matchup to get rocks up if Lando is the rocker. And Excadrill in this kind of team wants to be more offensive. Not that it can't be threatening and offensive at the same time, but it's just not the same. Whereas I think on something like Lando and Tarak at the same time could be cool. Although on such a team, I would definitely run knockoff Lando for messing with Scarms, lefties, or Helmet and making Excadrill way better against it. There is the switch back to Slowbro on Lando's rocks. So rocks up on both sides. Breloom wants to come in here on this U-turn to absorb the Scald, or Slowking, because Slowbro might also go for something like an Ice Beam or a Fire Blast or a Psyshock to try and hit the Breloom. So that's a safer bet. Nice call. And Slowbro cannot threaten Dragon Tail. That is a Slowking exclusive. So McMegan wants to preserve his own Slowking's health, get some regen going, and pivots Amoonguss back into the Slowking. And is he going to pivot out? No, he goes right for Giga Drain. Forces the issue, and Slowking does slack off, so both Pokemon heal there. And now Breloom comes into the Amoonguss with the burn really making itself felt here. And he is going to pivot into Excadrill on the... And he does reveal Sludge Bomb, so great move there. And now Exca is in a prime position because it's going to spin, and Tarak is not going to come back in and pop those rocks back up. So great move, and now McMegan is back in the chain where he was just with Slowbro, you know, scalding into Slowking. And great move. Really nice move on Dice's end. He knows, look, McMegan is smart. He's not going to scald into the Slowking again and be put in this bad situation, because scald into Slowking, bad. Slowking scalds and threatens Slowbro again. That's really bad, because then Dice's own Lando is a threat just by being Lando, you know. And then that whole Amoonguss, it's burned, and Breloom comes in, and then this whole pivot thing, it's bad. So McMegan is going to try and punish Dice for going back to Slowking there. And this is a really good example of a move that you could make the argument, okay, it's a little too aggressive when you're in a good position, but Dice also knows against a good player like McMegan, one of the worst things you can do is just play it super safe and give that great player the opportunity to battle themselves back into the game. Whereas if you make a good call like this, then you can really step on their throats and stop that comeback attempt before it even starts. So that was a really great move. I don't know what the logic behind SD in particular was. I guess if it is Sandforce Excadrill, so if you SD, you can beat Slowbro one-on-one. But I don't think Slowbro is staying in, because if you EQ, like I guess if you SD as Lando comes in, then you force it to EQ as opposed to U-turning. Lando comes in on an EQ, it's free to U-turn because you're at -1 and you want to stop that from happening. Whereas SD puts more pressure on it, because if you stay in, you can Iron Head it to death. And SD also will beat Slowbro one-on-one if it stays in and scalds and doesn't burn, or stays in and doesn't use scald. I'm just wondering, because if you're thinking, okay, well, the Slowking is coming back, you're not really going to have a satisfactory mid-ground move that covers all options here. And so I think SD might have just been like a win harder kind of thing, like overkill a little bit. Whereas if you just EQ, you still hit Slowbro. The Lando thing I don't think is really that important, not to mention that the Lando isn't really eager to switch in with rocks up, because then it's just losing health by U-turning over and over before the spin goes off. But what you're really trying to hit here is McMegan catching Slowking, and he's not going to Lando to catch Slowking, especially, I mean, without rocks maybe, but with rocks up, then definitely not. And what would punish Slowking would be, Tarak or T-Tar more than anything else. Maybe his own Excadrill, if you want to have that whole Sandforce Excadrill into Slowking matchup, which Slowking does not care for at all. So, and all three of those Pokemon that would punish the Slowking switch, T-Tar, Excadrill, Tarak, obviously get deleted by EQ. So I was thinking, if you're trying to catch that Slowking punishing move, then you could just EQ. And worst case, I mean, you also just might EQ into Slowbro, which is not the worst thing, because it has to stay in and use Scald and have it burn for it to really go wrong. So, which is not likely. Now, I don't think it's perfect logic, but there is no perfect logic for any of these moves being made, because of the whole Slowking is safe. And you could say, well, there's not enough McMegan can do to really punish to warrant not going to Slowking, because it can survive a T-Tar pursuit. But, with T-Tar being this healthy, then it might be able to pursue you repeatedly. And, again, stepping on the comeback attempt and everything. So, SD, I think, was a win harder button, but an EQ would have really just deleted everything. But, as it stands, EQing on, or SDing on T-Tar does ensure that something gets KO'd. And, so maybe I actually could have just gone a turn further and saw maybe it wasn't a win harder button, but that SD doesn't work if Terrakion or Excadrill come in. As you see, Excadrill comes in here, and Dice doesn't know if it's Scarf or not. So you just, I'm actually kind of surprised that he didn't switch out thinking the T-Tar might be Scarfed. Because with these other Pokemon, like, what did he think, non-Scarf T-Tar and Scarf Excadrill? Scarf Excadrill on a team like this without Magnezone or something to really deal with Skarmory seems really, I'm not sure. So I think I would have been wary of the Scarf Tar. And if you're going to switch out of the Excadrill, which could have pivoted in there for similar reasons than EQing there. I mean, it wound up working out, but I think EQ would have done the job just as well, because it also covers those Exca and T-Tar options. So Excadrill, now McMegan's a great move here. He does not even EQ, because Dice has now just jumped way ahead, right, with that KO of T-Tar. And he's like, okay, I am not going to risk my Excadrill against this other Excadrill. I do not need to. I have a full health Lando and also a paralyzed D-Knight, which is not going to do anything anymore. And even though McMegan, if it's not a Scarf Excadrill, then it's a Hail Mary speed tie attempt at the very worst. And he knows, look, even I can go for that speed tie and try to win, or I can not just play into Dice's hands, because now Dice is so far ahead, and if I just keep playing it safe while behind, that is going to make sure I lose. So now we have the inverse of the dynamic that we just had, whereas Dice was ahead, and if he plays too safe, then he's going to give it back to McMegan. Whereas now McMegan was behind, and if he plays too safe, he's never going to claw back into it. So with Ironhead, he was trying to get a nice Sand Force smack on that Lando, start wearing it down for Excadrill, for Terrakion. Or in this case, he doesn't give a free switch to a CBD Knight, and that's also good. Because the most that CBD Knight was going to do was switch into Excadrill EQ here and force it out in a one-on-one. So now Slowking pivots in to the next Ironhead. Actually takes a pretty big chunk because of Sand Force. God, Excadrill is strong. And also McMegan reveals, yes, it is not Mold Breaker. It's just going to be good old offensive Excadrill. So that he was doing the whole speed tie thing, which is really interesting that he went to it. No, because he could have gone to Terrakion. And Terrakion would have forced it out guaranteed. Hell, he could have said, okay, I'm going to force it out with Terrakion, and I'm going to get back into the game with by getting up rocks. But that also lets Lando in without punishing it with damage. And Lando is then going to start U-turning and threatening things. And Slowbro U-turn into T-Tar Pursuit. Being weak to both those moves is just so ugly. And instead he decided, you know what, I'm going to bluff the Scarf / do the whole I think I'm going to win the speed tie thing. And I think it was actually a Scarf bluff, especially because he had just gone to a non-Scarf T-Tar. So great Scarf bluff there, and he didn't even let up. So that was really, that is insanely high level stuff. So really props to McMegan for that. So Exca is going to stay in on the Slowking, which does not Scald Burn through Para as spin goes off and pressure is alleviated. And does he get an Ironhead here, knowing that he does? Great move. Decent smack on the Lando, which reveals itself to be slower than the Excadrill. Usually utility Landos are faster than Exca because a big part of their utility does come from being fast, and that speed comes from beating Exca one-on-one, because you switch into it with Intimidate and whatnot, but you also outspeed it in that one-on-one. And now, that's gruesome. As that Lando explodes from a crit Ironhead. I mean, he was just trying to flinch or wear it down for Terrakion, because once Lando takes damage, then Terrakion becomes an enormous threat. I mean, T-Tar, Scarf, not really a reliable revenge killer. Dragonite, obviously dead. Slowking, Breloom, eviscerated. Excadrill, of course, the same thing. So he really is just trying to wear it down directly. I mean, major props for Ironheading it in the first place. Again, into Slowking like that, great move. And also a good move on Dice's end for scalding on the turn he knows is going to be a spin. And really trying to punish the Excadrill. I guess you could make the argument that if he's trying to be, he has to be careful. No, I think you could make that argument, and maybe even should, that since he knows the Lando is going to be crucial for both Exca and Terrak, then you want to get it in on the rapid spin and not on what could feasibly be an Ironhead, because that turn was going to be rapid spin, because otherwise the metagame is the metagame. McMegan is just too pressured by rocks. So, yeah, I think that was, especially knowing the Lando was slower. So, Lando explodes there with a lucky turn for McMegan. And at this point, I guess we remember the game 1 crit on McMegan's own Excadrill, if we want to call it even Steve or whatever. But yeah, now the Breloom comes in, Excadrill is forced out, and he facades and smacks that Amoonguss really hard. That burn really making itself felt. and he does not risk his own Lando's health. He just decides, all right, Amoonguss goes down. I'm not going to need it anymore. It's paralyzed Slowking, paralyzed D-Knight, done more than enough. So now in comes Lando without damage, and yeah, honestly, Lando could just go for HP Ice very comfortably here. I mean, maybe EQ because it hits Breloom similarly, funnily enough, because especially defensive Breloom. Not being super bulky on the physical side, so I mean, obviously you want to HP Ice it more, but if you EQ it on that one turn, especially when it's at -1, you're fine, as long as you're damaging it. Just because the only EQ resists besides Breloom, if you think you are forcing Breloom out, the other EQ answer is D-Knight, which is on Death's Door and could also get HP Ice, so you don't want to really switch Breloom into D-Knight if you're trying to avoid damage because HP Ice could be coming your way. And obviously you don't want to switch Scarf T-Tar into an EQ, so. And the reason I mentioned this whole dichotomy of EQ versus HP Ice is because it's assuming that McMegan tries to get more lefties on Lando so he can switch into Breloom again more reliably, but he can also start forcing the issue and U-turn, and if he U-turns out of, let's say, Excadrill, or, I mean, that's also a risky switch, but if he U-turns out of pretty much anything besides Breloom, then he goes to Terrakion and starts I try to say KOing and killing stuff at the same time. So yeah, he just starts the Terrakion Close Combat Stone Edge Massacre. And yeah, so he could U-turn for that reason. And he Stealth Rocks. Hey, dual Stealth Rock. That's awesome. I'm a big fan, and I promise I did not remember that from watching this game earlier, because at this point, the third game in, I was mostly just skipping through because I was so thrilled by the Kyurem in game 2. So yeah, that's really good, because now D-Knight really can't switch into anything, and more pressure everywhere just for switching in. I mean, you think, oh, Breloom resistant. Look, when Breloom is getting chipped by Sand and Toxic Orb are fighting, then that extra 6% is big. And Rocks also gives Lando that free round of lefties on the switch, and even if Breloom stays in and attacks, then you have still gotten the then you still made something happen, and then you U-turn, because it's not a bulk up Breloom. It's going to have a fighting move, probably Drain Punch, and then Protect. You know, if it was bulk up, it'd be scarier, but then if it was bulk up, then it wouldn't have that Facade and Seed Bomb. So, using the information there to help make that choice. So, and then if it is -1, then you can U-turn into Slowbro, and Slowbro at -1 is not going to be threatened by Breloom Seed Bomb. So, and you can regenerate and slack it off, and it'll all be fine. So, and you'll have Rocks for it. So now Lando U-turns, gets the best of both worlds, is going to be forced to switch to Slowbro on Slowking and risk a Scald Burn, unfortunately. And you're going to have this dumb little Slow Twin War. What is this, Gen 8? And yeah, the burn is just a matter of time, because yeah, I mean, obviously McMegan wants to force a Slack off and gets Excadrill in on the beautifully timed, because yeah, once it's 37 and it's paralyzed, you don't want to, you know, fall prey to a badly timed full para. So he gets Excadrill in there. But even if Excadrill did get scalded, though, that was a well-timed. You could make the argument that Dice could have slacked off a turn earlier, because McMegan was going to play that sequence very cautiously. But now, once Slowking dropped to such low health, then you see that the switch to Excadrill becomes safer, because even if it does get scalded, and obviously you can always get bailed by full para, but even if Slowking does get scalded, then it's at such low health that it's in range of Terrakion, even with Regenerator in the picture, and obviously Regenerator is now being hindered by Stealth Rock, another reason why that Rocks was so great for McMegan. Yeah, so even if Excadrill does go down, then Terrakion comes in and starts, you know, destroying everything, and yeah, so there's that. But I'm trying to not repeat myself for the millionth time. But obviously you prefer if Excadrill comes in freely and gets a big Sand Force EQ, and there's the para to really hammer it home. But now Excadrill is getting a free KO, pretty much just spamming EQ. I mean, it can Iron Head there to hit Breloom harder, because it's also going to KO Slowking, but it doesn't really make a difference. And now X comes in, McMegan goes to Lando, you know, a mirror of that earlier dynamic, and Dice pulls the exact same move, Iron Heading in that X go one-on-one to hit the Lando on the switch. Beautifully done. But McMegan has another advantage in this match because his Lando is faster than the Excadrill, as you see by it getting leftovers first. Always pay attention to the lefties. Now Breloom comes in as it's the best remaining thing to take an EQ. Still not a good thing to take EQ. And Lando can chip it nastily with U-turn. I was going to say it's going to chip it with U-turn even if while switching out, which is obviously good, but that crit obviously makes it a lot worse. And Slowbro pivots in at full health and gets 2 KO by Seed Bomb. Breloom just barely hangs on in sand. But Slowbro... Oh, he's just there to pivot with Regenerator, and yeah, he doesn't need Lando's health as much. I mean, I'm actually keeping my eye on the health of these things, because what if Scarf T-Tar pulls off something? Like, if Excadrill comes in... Or, sorry, if Excadrill does get KO'd by Slowking Skull in the switch, then... And Terrakion then gets a KO, obviously. And then Dice responds with Scarf T-Tar, and you start thinking, what is the switch to this thing? Because Slowbro is not a switch to Scarf T-Tar, and Lando's not a switch to Scarf T-Tar at weakened health. In terms of crunch, obviously, Superpower bounces off, and Superpower is the move chasing out Terrakion. But, I mean, it would be more a case of you pivot into... I mean, you saw Slowbro took Breloom's C-Bomb. It would be a similar deal against Tyranitar's Crunch. You pivot into it, you see what move it uses, you regen out, and then you go back to Terrakion once you see it locks into Crunch, and Dice can't really punish that switch back into Terrakion because everything else is slower and destroyed. So as soon as he locks into Crunch, then he kind of, digs his own grave even deeper. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Just to really consider all factors in these kinds of complex late games, so you don't let it get away from you when you're ahead. But yeah, good pivot back into Lando. The Breloom -1, it's going to be in range now, and he's forced to absorb the U-turn with... Oh, no, he goes to T-Tar, and nothing else... That was a good move, because nothing else could absorb that EQ. And Lando pretty much just wins the game on its own now. Yeah, so that was a really, really great series. I really enjoyed that one, especially diving into it deeper. And, yeah, so McMegan gets the luck back that bit him in Game 1. But, yeah, both players were excellent in this series, team-wise, play-wise. And, yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.